Welcome, everyone, to the 51st Virtual Roundtable on Measuring Corruption. I am your host, as usual, Joseph Poche Alvarez, connecting here from the University of Osaka. And I'm very, very happy to welcome today to Solène Philippe from OECD, as well as Jisoo Park, her colleague also from OECD. And today we have a presentation. They have a presentation about a new project, a platform that is being piloted as we speak, and Solène and Jisoo will give all the details regarding the results of the follow-up mechanism to the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. So having done some work on the review of this type of documents in the past, I know how challenging it is. So it's very, very welcome to have kind of the information that normally you find in hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents, if not thousands, to be able to be directly distilled to see what is the degree of compliance with this convention. So I'm very, very excited about this, about the information that will be shared with us today and about this conversation. Before I invite Solène and Jisoo to take the floor, just a couple of things about housekeeping. As you know, as I mentioned, the meeting is being recorded. I will ask everyone to keep your microphone muted, unless you have a specific question or comment, in which case, please feel free to either raise your hand or click the hand emoji, or if I don't see, just you can unmute yourself and bring attention to your question. I will be asking a number of questions myself as well, Solène. I apologize in advance for interrupting every now and then. And for everyone else, if you could as well, the first time that you intervene, you could just very briefly introduce yourself, just your affiliation or any other detail that may be relevant to this community, just so Solène and Jisoo know who they are interacting with. All right. So that's it from my side. Solène and Jisoo, the floor is yours. Welcome to the roundtable.
So thank you, Joseph, for having us. We're really excited to be given the opportunity to present the dashboard. So just a word to say that just to introduce us, I'm Solène Philippe. I've been an analyst in the anti-corruption division of the OECD since 2018. And I've been working on the dashboard for now almost 6 years, because it was only published last year, but it's actually taking quite a few years to develop. My colleague Jisoo is here with us, but unfortunately her connection is not great. So maybe I'll just introduce her. Jisoo, if you don't mind. So Jisoo is also an analyst in the anti-corruption division. She's been with us for a couple of years now, and she's been really instrumental developing the dashboard because it's a Power BI visualization program, and she trained herself on Power BI and developed the whole project on the technical side. So I take this opportunity also to thank her very much. Her work has been amazing on this. And Jisoo, if you can just let me know if your connection is better, so that you can also take part in this presentation. Otherwise, I'll do it myself. So maybe just to start to highlight what Joseph was saying is that the dashboard is a pilot project. So it was published last year as something to be tried for the working group on bribery, which is now waiting for feedback from users. And so this is why we're very happy to talk about it today, to present it to experts, because well, we hope that we're actually going to be able to gather some valuable feedback on the dashboard that will be able to give or to convey to the working group when it reconsiders the dashboard, which we don't have a date for that, but it's probably in the coming months that the working group will take a step back maybe and see how this new project has been going since its publication. So what is the dashboard in a few words? Maybe I'll share my screen and just start to give you at least a screenshot of it. I think, let me know if it's, is it working? Can you see the presentation? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
So you have here just a screenshot of the dashboard. We'll show you in more detail how it works. But it's a public database, a set of tables and other visualization tools in Power BI that brings together data on where member countries of the OECD Working Group on Bribery stand in the working group's monitoring process. Again, we'll show it in detail later. As an introduction, the point I would like to make is to emphasize that developing this dashboard has been, as Joseph was saying, a challenge, but also a very interesting learning process. One key outcome of the dashboard development, I would say, is that it really contributed to an ongoing and increasingly important, actually, discussion within the working group on data, the data it has, the data it should have, and how it should use this data. So that was really, for us, an important achievement already of this dashboard. It's really to put this debate at the center of the attention of the working group on bribery. So the working group actually has a long history of collecting data about enforcement of the foreign bribery offense, meaning investigations, prosecutions, sanctions of this offense, which is at the heart of the convention that the OECD is owning. And so the enforcement data is published regularly every few years. And the last edition was last January. So the working group has experience in processing or collecting, analyzing, and publishing this kind of systematic data, really on enforcement. On other aspects of the implementation of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, it's been more limited. Systematic cross-country comparable data has been published, has been collected, but more on an ad hoc basis as part of horizontal studies. For example, on non-trial resolutions or on corporate liability. So this means that even though the working group on bribery has produced many reports that contain a lot of information about countries' efforts to fight foreign bribery and also information about whether they do it well or not, these reports are fundamentally narrative reports that are really emphasizing the objective of relevance in a specific context. So the purpose is really for reports to be considered and analyzed, understood in the national context. There is no explicit or no priority objective to develop cross-country systematic data within these reports. So in that sense, the dashboard, which aims to give a sense of where countries stand in the monitoring process, give a sense of how they've implemented the convention, has been a challenge because we had to extract systematic data from reports that were fundamentally not meant for that purpose. So that's just the point I wanted to make in the introduction. So what's this presentation? How will we structure this presentation? First, I will say a few words about the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, which is the basis, of course, for the monitoring dashboard. Then a few words also on the working group on bribery and on its monitoring process, its peer review process. Then a few words on the development of the dashboard, and then we'll get to a demonstration of the dashboard. We'll go to the website and I will try to show you how it works and what we've tried to achieve in this dashboard. And finally, a few words on what we think. We're not the working group, we're not the OECD, but as the analysts who worked on the dashboard, we think are the main achievements and also the challenges that the dashboard represents. So I don't know if you have any question at this stage, but just no. So should I go? Okay, so just maybe a few words on the Anti-Bribery Convention. So this instrument, which is formed the basis for the dashboard. So I don't know how familiar you are with this instrument, so I'll just give you an introduction to it. So its full title is the Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transactions. It was signed in 1997. It entered into force in 1999. One of its main characteristics, and which makes it different from the other anti-corruption instruments internationally, is that it really focuses on one specific offense, which is foreign bribery, active bribery by natural or legal persons of foreign public officials in order to obtain an advantage or a contract or other commercial advantage in international business transactions. There have been many cases that have been widely reported about, huge cases. You probably know, for example, recently the Airbus case, or Odebrecht related to the Lava Jato case in Brazil also. So this is the type of corruption really that this convention is about. So why this specific offense, and why is it an OECD instrument? In a few words, it's basically, this convention was conceived as a instrument to address market inefficiency. It's really a tool to regulate international markets. So by prohibiting businesses from bribing public officials abroad, the markets are better regulated. That is good for international trade and eventually good for economic development. So that's really the purpose, the objective of this convention. So 46 countries are currently, I'll go back to this slide, sorry. 46 countries are currently parties to the convention. So the 38 OECD members and 8 more countries. Maybe I'll just go to the slide where you find the list of the countries. So Ukraine is in the process of ratifying the convention, and it will become the 47th party to the convention. Russia is one of the state parties, and in case you wonder, so it's a party to the convention, but its participation in the monitoring process has been suspended. So to give you an overview of the convention, so it's really built around this specific offense of foreign bribery. So Article 1 defines the offense. Then you have a provision on the responsibility of legal persons. Criminal can be also administrative or other. Then provision on effective, proportionate, dissuasive sanctions and rules on seizure and confiscation. There are also rules on jurisdiction. One of the key provisions of the convention is Article 5 on enforcement, so on investigation and prosecutions, and which very importantly provides that investigations and prosecutions should be protected from undue influence, so from any national economic interest or diplomatic considerations. So it's really about independence. It's a very important article, which actually gives rise to a lot of very sensitive discussion in countries, because obviously, as I said, it touches upon independence. And it's, I think, a very specific, or very, yes, one of the characteristics of this convention. And I think what also makes it particularly interesting and effective. We also have a few provisions on the statute of limitations on related offenses, which are money laundering and false accounting. And finally, international cooperation, so mutual legal assistance and extradition. Another important article of that convention, and I'll finalize this overview of the convention with this, is Article 12, which is about the peer review process. So it provides that parties shall carry out a program of systematic follow-up to monitor and promote the full implementation of the Convention. This shall be done in the context of the OECD Working Group on Bribery. And the monitoring shall be based on a system of mutual evaluations or peer review process, where each country is examined in turn by the Working Group on Bribery. So that's really in the Convention itself. The monitoring process is really organized within the Convention itself. And that's how it ensures that how the Convention really organizes its own, let's say, enforcement in countries. Yes, Joseph, I see you have your...
Yes, thank you. So I understand that there in 2021, OECD also released
Yeah,
anti-bribery recommendations, right? Which
exactly.
updated the one from 2009. Could you tell us a little bit about these recommendations and where do they fit vis-a-vis the convention itself?
Yes, absolutely, and thanks for this. It's because I was going to mention that so the convention there are actually what we call related instruments to the convention, which include the most important of them, I would say, is as you mentioned, the 2021 recommendation on further combating foreign bribery, which is quite a comprehensive document which aims to provide more detail or elaborate on some of the provisions of the convention, but also expands its scope and covers other topics. It also covers prevention, for example, with provisions on what companies, what measures or programs companies should put in place to prevent convention, so compliance programs, basically. It also covers detection. It includes, for example, a set of detailed provisions on whistleblower protections, which has been considered by the working group as really a key aspect of a national regime to fight foreign bribery, because it's a key element to detect it. It also contains provisions on non-trial resolutions, so on type of settlement type resolutions, and yeah, it's really detailed, quite a long document. We also have related instruments in relation to detection by export credits or official development assistance, and the non-tax deductibility of bribes. So there's the so-called tax recommendation. So these are the convention plus the related instruments, the set of standard that the working group on bribery of the OECD is monitoring the implementation of by countries. So I don't know if you wanted to have more detail on this, on the content, on the substance of these standards. I'm happy to elaborate. I just wanted to give you an overview at this stage.
Only if it will be reflected in the dashboard, so that I know if I should bring it up later or not.
No, I think well, yeah, maybe we can, you can bring it up later, but I think at this stage it gives you the general topics which we actually try to reflect in the dashboard itself.
Okay.
So
If I may
yes.
add then ask a separate question, just so that everyone is also so that we can avoid any confusion, because as you know, we have also had conversations as part of the roundtable series with a different office within the OECD, the one
Yeah.
managing the public integrity indicators. So could you tell us a little bit about, so I know that this is a separate activity, but if you could tell us a little bit about the relationship between these two activities, because from a data management perspective, I mean, we're dealing with anti-corruption indicators, but of a different nature with different sources. How does it look from your side?
So, well, I have to say that we consider that they're really complementary, but they're also quite separate processes. And I understand, because I'm really not part of that team who's in charge of those indicators, that they really focus on public sector integrity, while we focus more on private companies or private actors' behaviors on markets. So it's kind of another side of the corruption, let's say the anti-corruption sphere. So this is what I think we're kind of on a separate path, but I can understand that from you all anti-corruption experts who deal with both aspects, you would want to see how they reconcile. But I would say that we obviously looked at their indicators, but I think they're kind of quite distinct because we are really focusing on foreign bribery.
So we think again. So we before moving on to the next point, we also again this is something that I also like reflected about in the past, and I just wanted I always like a little bit of clarification about this. We also I really like what you said about the complementarity between the two aspects, right? Because you're dealing with corruption very much involved in the private sector and the role of private actors in this, of course, because we're dealing with the bribery of foreign officials by private actors, right? Whereas the public integrity indicators, as you said, they look at the state side of this. Now, when it comes to a review of implementation of this convention, however, what is assessed is very much the adoption of legal norms, their implementation, enforcement. So the review process itself, it looks at what the state is doing in implementing the anti-bribery convention. Yes. So
Yeah.
I always have a doubt if there is information or insights from the public integrity indicators that could potentially go to feed this review mechanism. Is this something that could be considered, has been considered, or is this just completely like separate indicators?
I would say they're not completely separate. It's really more a question of priority. But an example that comes to mind when you ask this question is, for example, the integrity of law enforcement authorities, because this is something we actually look at closely under Article 5 that I was mentioning before, on protecting investigations and prosecutions from undue influence. So I remember having taken part in some evaluations where we were really looking at the integrity of the measures in place to ensure that law enforcement bodies had the necessary safeguards, but had also been trained to on code of ethics and this kind of thing. So I think this is where there is a link, and we do look at what is produced by other parts of the OECD. We do get in touch with our colleagues from Gov to also get a sense. I'd say this is probably, in my experience at least, of the peer review process where we make the link and where we actually use their data for law enforcement authorities.
Great, thank you. That makes a lot of sense, and it's very good to hear that again. There is the possibility or this aperture for synergy,
Yes.
which again, especially in our area, we usually work with scarce resources, and it seems that every year we just need to move towards higher and higher levels of efficiency, especially given the state of the world today. So it's good to hear that there's at the very least the potential for this.
No, and absolutely. And of course, beyond Gov, so the Public Governance Directorate of the OECD, we also look at what Greco does in the Council of Europe, what UNODC, of course, what the FATF does. I mean, we are also referring to and using as much data or information available from other peer review or monitoring bodies. So definitely not only for resource efficiency, as you were saying, but also because that's directly relevant to us. Yeah.
Thank you. I have other questions about the review mechanism and the phases, but I know you will be covering that later as well.
Yes, yeah. So I'll now I'll dig a bit further into the monitoring process. So first, to start with the working group on bribery. So it's important to talk about the monitoring process, obviously, because the dashboard is really a product of the monitoring process in that it uses information produced by the monitoring process of the working group on bribery. And it's also meant to enhance its impact. So it's really a part of the monitoring process. So monitoring, as I mentioned before, is really the responsibility of the working group on bribery of the OECD, which is made of representatives from all the parties to the convention, so 46, as I mentioned before, at the moment. So the types of experts we have around the table are often at the policy level, people from the ministries of justice, or ministries of foreign affairs, or also ministries of finance. But we also have a lot of practitioners, prosecutors in particular. The working group on bribery meets 3 or 4 times a year. Now it's three times for resource constraints. It has other activities, which I'm not touching upon today, but it includes, for example, outreach to non-members. But its main task, and how it's mentioned in the convention, is really coordinating the peer review process. So each party is assessed in turn by experts from 2 other parties. So, for example, Jisoo is working on that evaluation at the moment. Slovakia is being evaluated by Japan and Turkey. And I recently worked on Estonia, which was evaluated by Poland and Portugal. So the process spans over more or less a year. It starts with a detailed questionnaire that the country has to respond to. Based on this, we organize an on-site visit with the experts to the country. So the on-site visit lasts around 3 to 4 days, 4 to 5 days, depending on the country and the constraints there. And the objective is to meet all the relevant stakeholders, of course, from the public sector, so investigators, prosecutors, Ministry of Justice, the financial intelligence units, tax authorities, also representatives from the civil society, so that would be so NGOs, academia, journalists, investigative journalists are usually very, very interesting, have very interesting views on how the convention and related instruments are implemented in the country, and the private sector, because again, what we also really need to understand is whether they have preventive measures in place, whether there is a framework for them to report, to self-report if anything has been committed by the private sector, and to get a sense of whether they think also the system as a whole is effective and dissuasive in a way. So based on the information collected through the questionnaire and the on-site visit, then the team, so the experts and the OECD Secretariat, prepare a draft report which contains recommendations. And this is really, I would say, the most important part of these reports. So you have a list of recommendations at the end, which are the main outcome of it. So the number of recommendations varies greatly across countries. We've had, in the current phase of evaluation, I think the lowest number was 9 in the United States. And the highest number, I think, was around 70, 72 for Poland. So recommendations that are given to a country can include recommendations to amend legislation, to train practitioners, prosecutors, to allocate more resources to some, for example, the investigative bodies, to put in place safeguards against undue influence in investigations, prosecutions. So this is the type of measures the working group recommends that its members take. And so this draft report, which is prepared by the evaluation team, is discussed by the working group during one of its plenary meetings. The decision-making rule is consensus -1, meaning that the country evaluated cannot veto a finding or the report itself. And the full report is published on the OECD website, together with the press release, which actually is also adopted by the working group and negotiated, and usually very actively negotiated by members, because obviously that's the most visible part of an evaluation. It's probably one of the most important outcomes in practice. So that's for the evaluations. So a key component of the monitoring process is what comes after the evaluation, which is the follow-up process. So I'm sorry, I should have shown that earlier. So now we've reached the follow-up process, which would be the last two bubbles on that slide. So the working group basically dedicates a lot of resources to monitoring how countries implement the recommendations that are issued as part of an evaluation. So after 2 years, every single country goes through what we call a 2-year follow-up report, in which every single recommendation is assessed. Every country has to explain what they have done to implement each recommendation. That's quite a detailed report, and it gives rise to ratings. So each recommendation is rated either fully implemented, partially implemented, or not implemented. So that's the 2-year follow-up, and the reports and the ratings are public. Then, in the event of insufficient progress by countries, we have what we call the additional follow-up, let's say, or additional measures. If countries have not addressed an important recommendation, or if they've really not done any progress at all. So there's a whole range of measures that the working group can use. It's quite discretionary in a way, how it can use these measures. There is no sequence or no clear or systematic framework. There's just the availability of a whole range of measures, including oral additional reports from a country to the working group, written ones. You would have also expedited reporting, meaning asking a country to report at every plenary on progress. The working group can also send letters to the relevant minister of the country to express its concerns. What it can also do is issue a public statement to draw attention publicly to a specific concern by the working group. And you would have even more serious measures, such as a high-level mission, so a high-level delegation from representatives of the working group going to a country to meet with the high-level representatives of that country to express concerns. The most recent one was in Switzerland, actually last year. And that was due to, just to give you an example, to outstanding issues in relation to lack of whistleblower protections in the private sector and insufficient level of sanctions for foreign bribery for legal persons. So there was a high-level mission to Switzerland. There have been a few over the last years. Finally, a measure that has never been actually applied is what we call the due diligence warning, which, since it has never been applied, I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but the principle is that it would be a strongly worded public statement encouraging the international business community to take into account the risks represented by businesses coming from a country that's basically failing to implement the convention. And in that sense, that represents a higher risk in terms of bribery in international transactions on international markets. So that's for the additional measures. Also, something important is that the country monitoring process. Sorry, Joseph.
No,
I
please
see
go
your
ahead.
hand.
Finish your thought.
No. It's just to clarify also that the monitoring is organized in several successive phases. So we are now about to complete or close to the end of phase 4, which started in 2016. So phase 1 was quite different in that it was kind of assessing technical compliance, let's say legislation only. And since phase 2, there's been a lot more attention also to how the convention is implemented in practice. So now the working group is about to start working on the design of the new phase of evaluation, which will start hopefully in a few years. So, Joseph, you wanted to?
Yes, thank you. You were already starting to touch upon that aspect. So I wanted to ask you about the phases, right? Because for what I understand, it diverges a little bit from how the rounds of review are structured around for example, the United Nations Convention or the convention in the Organization of American States, which follow a division in which different rounds focus on specific articles of the
Yeah.
convention, right? But that's not really how the phases are structured in the OECD. So could you walk us through them?
No, that's a very good question because, as I was mentioning, we have really started to think about what the next phase could look like. And one of the options, it's really internal discussions that I'm really that doesn't prejudge at all what's going to happen. But one of the options is indeed to think maybe we could do as other peer review bodies do, is to just try to focus on specific topics, maybe have shorter rounds because. Also, that's also a resource conscious choice in a way. I don't know, it depends on how it's done, obviously, but that's an option. But so far, it's true that the approach has been to really cover the whole spectrum of the standards, so the convention and the related instruments. The difference between phases 2, 3, and 4 is not that obvious because, again, covers all the same standards. I'd say it's more a question of focus because phase 3 was really about looking at what's done in phase 2 and looking at the recommendations from phase 2. And phase 4 was doing the same, but also giving a lot of attention, a lot more attention or detailed analysis on detection and on corporate liability. I think phase 4, in that sense, really placed a strong emphasis on these two aspects, which were found based on results from previous phases to be lacking or main weaknesses in countries' system. But in effect, I would say that it's more the narrative or the relative weight of topics, but it's the same standards and it's more or less the same approach. There's also a question as to whether a country like Ukraine, for example, that's joining the working group now, would Ukraine have to go through all phases? Or does it really make sense given the fact that these phases are quite similar in a way, at least from 2 to 4? So that's an internal question. But
So, as a follow-up, I would like to ask about the temporality of these phases, right? So I also wanted to ask you because this is the first time that we have conversation specifically about conventions in the roundtable. I
okay,
believe maybe we may have another one, but because normally it's not very common that we see the reports being transformed into like numerical data, right? Well, this is
yeah.
one of those very special occasions in which we can see these as represented in numbers. Now, because the OECD review started back in 1999 with phase 1, right?
Mhm.
So other phases continue looking at the recommendations that were shared in the previous phases to see if the
Yeah.
country have kind of like improved in that specific aspect. Yes. But an issue that I have encountered in the past is that measures of the convention that did not invite a recommendation because maybe they were satisfactory at that moment, after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, situation in a lot of countries changes very quickly, right? So if, for example, if we are right now in 2026 and we're looking at a report that was drafted based on information from 2015, 2016, it may be outdated, right? So my question is, how is this managed from I guess from a technical perspective in terms of being able to have this global image of the level of implementation in a country, seeing how information has been kind of like broken down across a many years.
So actually, that's that's really the question for us. It's so we simply don't have the data for this. This is the short answer. We cannot give, based on the data we have, a broad picture of the global level of implementation by one country or globally, because as I mentioned, the only moment where we actually systematically and formally assess the level of recommendation, of implementation of recommendations is after 2 years. There is I'm not going to go into it because it's extremely complicated, but there's an exceptional procedure which allows for some updates, but it's never really worked. So it means that even if you have an update after 2 years, well, that's the only update you have. And you're right, a country usually phases, I don't know the numbers actually, but I would say on average, maybe a country is evaluated every 8 years, maybe, even maybe more in some cases. So you have a whole number of years where the information you have about the implementation of the recommendations, which by the way is also not exactly the same as information about the implementation of the convention. It's only about the deficiencies. So yeah, we don't have this information. And this was, when I'll get to the dashboard, this was one of the complexity of coming up with the right messaging with the dashboard is that we don't, it's not that we don't want to, but we cannot provide an overview of the level of implementation by all countries over, over the whole spectrum of the standards. We can only talk about the most serious deficiencies that are currently raising concerns within the working group, which is a different thing.
Yes, thank you.
So,
So there's another point that I'll try to bring back towards the end of the conversation because it makes more sense after looking at the dashboard. But
mhm.
yeah, just for everyone also to kind of be on the same page about the conversation about temporality and the difficulties presented by it is that the reports are extremely rich, right? In terms of detail, the amount of effort that go into drafting them, the amount of
Yeah.
back and forward and filling up the questionnaires and collecting information. It seems that is that level of richness that also makes it difficult to keep it updated, right?
No, no, absolutely. And it's, I actually wanted to make a point that's related to this, if you don't mind, is that one of the, so to finish maybe on the monitoring process, one of the main principles is like, I would say the philosophy in a way of the evaluations of the working group is that uh, the working group takes a tailor-based approach to evaluations, considering, I'm quoting the methodology of the current phase, considering each country's unique situation and challenges. And it's really important because what it means in practice is that even though the standards are the same for all countries, the questionnaire is more or less the same. We adapt it, of course, but it's fundamentally the same. The template of the reports is the same, but the level of detail or the level of attention that you would give to some aspect of the standards may change. And more importantly, what the working group is not trying to do, it's not the priority, it's not the objective in itself, is to compare. It's really to be relevant in a specific context. So there's a lot of information indeed, but this information is not really structured or produced or drafted with a view to allowing for comparisons. Of course, if it's not also ignored or it's not an opposition to that principle, but really the focus is to be relevant in a specific context to be efficient, to have an impact. And that's also, I think, what has been the strength of the working group over the years is that these reports are really detailed. They're really trying to make sense of the situation of how the implementation is done within the specific country. But the downside of that is that, yes, these reports do not lend themselves to systematic data collection. It's really narrative reports in a way, and that was the challenge again with the dashboard.
If I may
So
ask one more
yeah,
question about that aspect, because I think that's super interesting. You mentioned, so when trying to tailor to the specificities of that country, so we're not just looking at different social conditions, economic conditions, etc. Of course, the institutional design of the different countries needs to be taken into consideration to see if they satisfy the spirit of the convention itself,
yeah,
right? As the number of countries that are party to the convention has increased over the years, that means that there are more reports to produce and go through, right? More meetings, I assume. and at the same time, more context to take into consideration. Um, Has this have an impact at all in the way that the review mechanism functions, or it just kind of we need more people, more budget, or more time, or whatever it is?
In terms of resources, I think, unfortunately, I don't think the higher number of members has really translated into more staff. It's actually more pressure, and there's a clear resource issue in the secretariat, and that's also clearly framing the discussion on the future round of evaluations. Is how to do as well with constrained resources. So definitely, but also it's true that with a higher number of countries, you have a higher level of diversity of systems, and the working group is really trying to expand to not only, let's say, European countries, or with countries that have a legal tradition that comes from known systems, let's say. So it become even more diverse, and this is also why I think this discussion on data and on consistency of data, on how to produce data, and to make sure that what we produce is comparable, or at least, I don't know if that's the right word, but can be aggregated even in terms of conclusions on the general trends within the working group, is really important, because that's a concern. Yeah, we're going to have more more diverse members, so we're going to have to do something about it. I think members are really conscious of that.
In some cases, the members are, well, in all cases, the members are a party to multiple corruption-related
Yep.
conventions, right? In the case of, for example, Brazil, Mexico, they have the United Nations Convention, the OECD Convention, and the Organization of American States Convention. Does that make things easier, or I mean, I know that the question belong more to I guess the public officials from that side, but in your experience, I don't know if you have encountered this. Like, is that something that they would complain about, the fact that they have to continue collecting multiple times, or can they just sort of recycle the information that they have already collected for one convention and submit it to the organization?
No, that's a very good question. I think we actually hear a lot from countries, and more like, oh, but we've also had Greco or the FATF. FATF being, I guess, one of the most resource-intensive exercises for countries, and so we also have to take that into account. We actually try to adjust our respective calendars, but it's true there's what we call evaluation fatigue. And some countries, I guess, we can see that actually when we read other peer review bodies' reports, that countries have provided the same information. There might be a bit of copying and pasting, which is fair enough, because we do have some overlap in terms of topics. But I think it's a real issue in terms of resources. It's usually the same people from the Ministry of Justice that would coordinate these exercises, and it's extremely heavy to them. Yeah, how to take that into account better? That's probably for members to think about. But we're trying to take that into account. In EU countries, I think now we also have the EU rule of law reports. I think also quite heavy. So there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Thank you. And so sorry for so many questions. That was the
No,
last
of
one
course.
for this stage. Even before getting to the dashboard, but I do think that it will help everyone make better sense of the data, having better understood the complexity of the convention and the review mechanism itself. So thank you so much.
No. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot for the question, and please feel free to interrupt anytime when anything is not clear. So I was going to say actually in the presentation, just to give a counter example to what we're doing in the working group on bribery. So it's a bit of it's obviously more nuanced, but you probably know the Financial Action Task Force monitoring process. So I don't know if you know it, but in the area of anti-money laundering. And the outcome of this monitoring, this peer review process, is gray or blacklisting. So obviously with a lot of consequences for countries' in particular financial systems. So countries are really trying their best not to be on this list. And it means that because of this blacklisting at the end, the whole monitoring process, and the way the findings are structured is really systematic. It's based on ratings, and it's organized around comparability, because at the end of the process, you have a blacklist. We don't have that. So this is also why it's a very different philosophy in a way. The project or the objective of the working group on bribery, again, being, I think that's how I understand it, in a way to be relevant in a specific country and less about comparability. So to go back to, really to start talking about the dashboard itself. So it was developed, it started in 2020 actually, at a time where the working group became worried about a growing number of what was perceived as such, a growing number of countries being under additional measures, meaning having serious implementation issues. And the working group at that time decided that it would conduct kind of audits of the implementation situation. Was it so bad? Was it going backwards? And based on this, start to consider innovative tools to encourage implementation. So really the dashboard is the product of a discussion within the working group on lack of implementation, and how to put more pressure basically on countries to implement the convention and related instruments. So to conduct this audit and to really get a sense of whether the situation was bad, we, as mentioned, for all the reasons mentioned, we really didn't have indicators or data. We had enforcement data, which was good, but which did not tell us much about all the other aspects of the convention. So it's number of investigations, sanctions, etc. But what about the inputs to that? And what about prevention? So we had to think of a way to give a sense of the level of implementation, and the indicators we had were basically around the recommendations. That's all we had. That's what was closest to a systematic data set for all countries. So one recommendation being one deficiency against the specific standards. We also had the additional measures as an indicator, which actually signaled a serious implementation issue. And we also had the implementation level at year 2, as mentioned before. It was very systematic, actually, with ratings, but unfortunately out of date very quickly. So we could not really use that. Another difficulty was that at the time, we didn't really have tools to track either recommendations or additional measures. Everyone in the secretariat at the OECD was kind of collecting its own data, but we didn't really have a systematic database, which now we have. We have quite good internal tools, including thanks to Jisoo. We have an amazing compilation of recommendations now. But with these limited indicators, we still managed to come to the conclusion at the time that indeed implementation was not great. There was an increasing number of countries under additional measures, an increasing number of additional measures implemented overall, and that recommendations actually touched upon a number of building blocks of the convention. So the situation was not good, and we were actually justified to build this dashboard. And so the dashboard used these indicators that we had. The idea was really to publish data in a more systematic, in an easier to understand format, to actually make countries more accountable to the public of the level of implementation and the implementation issues. So the dashboard, so this public database, had really two complementary objectives: facilitating access to information about the monitoring process, so really making it more transparent for the public, easier to understand, but also highlighting those countries that are under additional measures to put pressure on countries to implement this. So that was really this, in a way, this enforcement tool, using data to increase pressure on countries. So that was the idea. And I don't know if you have questions, but maybe I'll go now to the dashboard. Finally.
Yes, please.
So I think I stopped sharing, I think. Or can you see it?
Not yet. Right now it's not sharing.
Okay, so I will now share again, and I will share can you see? So that must be this. You will see yourself, and then I will go to the dashboard.
Perfect.
So first, I just go really to the top of the page. It's actually meaningful because so the dashboard was a challenge for countries, and they were worried, and I understand, because of the indicators we had, which were limited, we had to send the right message and really just say, this is about countries being under additional measures. So countries really wanted to have not a lot, but significant information, context, before users would actually reach the dashboard. So this is why you have kind of you have to scroll down quite a lot on the page after this text, which was adopted by the working group, to reach the dashboard. It's probably not helping access, but the rationale being that countries really wanted to make sure that users, before getting to the dashboard itself, would understand where it came from and what it was trying or not trying to achieve. So here's the dashboard. So it's a Power BI tool, a visualization tool. As you can see, the version you have was last updated in December. We had another plenary meeting in March, so we're now updating it. It's going to be updated in a few weeks. The updates need to be approved by the members through written procedure, which is complex. But so you can see you have the list of, it starts with the list of countries. Then it just gives factually the phase countries are at the moment. You can see that some members have acceded more recently. So Costa Rica, for example, is still at phase 2. Then you have the current status, which you have 3 possible statuses. So under evaluation. So that's the case, for example, of Slovakia, I guess, if we go, or because it's from December, Argentina is probably awaiting next evaluation. Yes. So now the evaluation was adopted, but back in December, it was the situation. Under regular follow-up, so that's within the 2 years following an evaluation, before the comprehensive 2-year follow-up with ratings on every single recommendation, as I was mentioning. And countries after regular follow-up, normally, would, if there are outstanding issues, and in the vast majority of cases, they are placed under additional measures. They are placed under additional measures, as you can see. For those countries that are under additional measures, we give the number of additional measures received in the phase, the number of issues, and each issue, as you can see, is represented by a dot. A dot is yellow until 5 years, for 5 years, and then becomes red to give a sense of the how long the working group has been waiting for progress, and hopefully put a bit more pressure on the countries concerned. So I need to scroll. So I don't know if you can see, or the other. Sorry, that's the tabs. Sorry, I'm usually not using it like that. So so you can see here all the countries. So it goes up to the United States, and I'm just showing you the categories that we have, because each dot is placed in categories that are defined by topics, which are really, so there's never really been a discussion within the working group on these categories, because I think they're quite self-explanatory, intuitive, even though in practice it's not always easy to classify these issues. But so that's the first page, and that's the main yes, that's the main dashboard itself. So if you hover over a country, that gives you a bit more information, just a recap of the current phase, when it started, the current status. I'll choose maybe another country. Sorry, so Denmark maybe. So you would have the level of implementation of recommendations after 2 years. That's what we were saying. This is not extremely up to date. So in the case of Denmark, it's quite recent, so it's still interesting. For some countries, it's a lot older. So it was actually countries who insisted on having this information in the dashboard because they felt it was important. It was giving the broad picture. But again, I think unfortunately this information can become outdated quite quickly. And then you have the list of additional measures. Then if you want more detail on a single country, you have to go to what we call country summaries. And so you have an example here, which is Netherlands, so which gives you some of the information that was already in the main dashboard, but also gives you a timeline, again, to give an idea of how long it's been, how long the working group has waited for progress, to make it a bit more visual. And you have, importantly, this is where you will find the detail of the issues that justify the additional measures. So the issues the working group considers are more concerning and deserve the application of additional measures. So that's an example. And finally, we also included some information about the monitoring process, with the understanding that it's not straightforward, and that we want to help readers make sense of the information. So with the phases, with the list of additional measures also. So that's the dashboard. I don't know if you have any questions or.
Yes. But Saverio, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you, Joseph, and thank you for this super interesting roundtable. I was very curious about this roundtable because I'm a postdoc from University of Pisa, and I'm involved in an Horizon project with Professor Lucio, and we are in the last year we coded all the OECD reports about each phase of country, and so we we create a quite similar data dashboard.
Yeah.
So it's if you want, we can share this information.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Have an exchange. What do you think? And it's just a couple of curiosity, just to see if we are focusing on the right information, because in the report of OECD, most of the attention is done about coding the level of implementation of recommendations, so satisfactory, partially, and or not satisfactory. So if this information are in the part of the in the part of the dashboard, and also if the another question is about the decision to pass a country from a phase to another phase is in some sense related to a certain level of performance in implementation. And the third one is about the all information that you collect about, for example, the number of corruption cases, the number of judgment in the last year, and for some country, I read that you have information case by case. In some country, the information are hidden because of the privacy, because of a number of reasons. And also, if this performance, in sense, I mean, the number of cases that a country open or change in the time, is in some sense affect the decision for a country to pass to a phase to another phase. Thank you so much.
No, thanks a lot for these questions. I'll try to cover them all. So in terms of the ratings, you were mentioning the ratings on the level of implementation of the recommendations. So this is what we call the 2-year reports. This is what I was mentioning. And you can see, so here we have Argentina. So it's actually undergoing just finished its phase 4 evaluation. But if we're still in December, let's say we're still in December 2025, the most recent 2-year report was 2019. They had 45 recommendations, you see, and we have the number of fully, partially not implemented. You would also find this information in the country summary for Argentina. But I think this is a good example where, so that information was from 2019, and in a country like Argentina, in many countries, 7 years is extremely long in terms of anti-corruption situation. But in case of Argentina in particular, this information unfortunately doesn't tell us much about what the situation is now. So, but we still, again, because the members wanted to have as much information combined in this dashboard, we still reflected it in a way. On whether, I think that was your second question, on whether you need to reach a certain level of implementation before starting a new phase. So I think technically the idea was in the processes, the idea was that one of the additional measures was suspension of the next phase. So it was considered, that was an option considered by the working group, that if a country would do really, really bad, then it would not qualify in a way for the next evaluation. To my knowledge, it's never really been applied. I can think of one country where I think it was postponed by a few cycles, but I'm not even sure if it was really only for that. So it's not really happened. And actually, this is also one of the difficulties, is that even if a country does bad, for example, in phase 3 and have lots of issues, is still under additional measures, going through phase 4 would, mean starting back again and looking good in the dashboard in a way, because then this country is under evaluation or under regular follow-up and no longer, and the past. So everything that was done before doesn't appear in the dashboard anymore. So that's, I think that's one of also the challenges with the dashboard in terms of messaging too. And I think you were mentioning also, you were asking questions about enforcement data. So this is another data project, in a way, data collection project of the working group. But how we reflect the level of enforcement, meaning investigations, prosecutions, sanctions, is this first column that's called enforcement of foreign bribery. And a country would receive a dot if the working groups actually worried with the level of enforcement, consider that there are not enough investigations, prosecutions, or sanctions, and would ask the country to report back, for example, or would give additional measures because of the limited enforcement in that country. On the specific number of cases and everything, so the enforcement data workstream would give you aggregated numbers. You would find tables with, for each country, the number of investigations, prosecutions, sanctions, etc. And then if you want to have more information about cases that would be anonymized in most countries, you would have to look at the specific reports themselves. That would give you, yes, again, probably anonymized information, even though I understand that in some countries it's more complicated to give any information at all, any ongoing cases. So it would really depend, the level of information you would get would also depend on the country. So I don't know if I responded to.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Very, 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 very interesting. And again, if you want, we can share. The work we did in the last year and the database that we collect about enforcement and about.
That definitely. If maybe we can follow up. And I'm sorry to hear that we both had to struggle to actually do the complicated work or the time-consuming work of collecting data. We could have joined forces, but maybe there's I would be very curious to know how you built also a database. That would be great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So if I may also ask a question about this the table that we have here, could you hover over the data for Argentina for a moment to get that perfect? Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 45 recommendations provided, yes, and we have the breakdown for the results of the evaluation of those recommendations upon the 2-year report, right?
Yeah.
Of which 15 were fully implemented, 23 were partially implemented, and 7 were not implemented. But in under number of additional measures, we have no additional measures were provided for Argentina, even though 7 recommendations were not implemented. how should we interpret that? I mean, I'm sure that this is part of the negotiation process, but what does that mean for us?
No, exactly. So that's really, and again, Argentina is a good example because Argentina technically, so we're in December 2025. That's the date of the data. Argentina was under evaluation. So basically, its report was adopted a couple of weeks ago. So we do not consider these countries. I mean, they go from additional measures, which Argentina, I think, was until the very end of phase 3 because of the outstanding issues. And they were automatically, like just technically, transferred to the category awaiting next evaluation. And for those countries, we just say the country is no longer under additional measures. But what is, I don't know, I hope it's not misleading or it's confusing, is that precisely, and this is what we try to say in the introduction to the dashboard, it doesn't mean that Argentina does not have implementation issues. It means that we're waiting for the next evaluation of Argentina. So that was really, actually, your question is, I mean, really confirms the question, and the difficulty we had was really to make sure that it was clear to the users that a country awaiting next evaluation or under regular follow-up is not necessarily doing well. It's just that technically it is at a stage of an evaluation of the monitoring process where the working group cannot or has not applied additional measures.
All right. So in that case, let me ask a follow-up question regarding the design itself, because of course, as we know, in the process of developing this type of project, there are a number of methodological choices that we make, right? In terms of, well, all of this is data, all of that is based on evidence, but we decide how to reflect them, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And so decisions are made. So here in the table we have the number of additional measures and the indicators to which they belong with color coded dots based on for how long they've been active.
Yes.
I understand what you explained, that for Argentina and others, because they were awaiting the next evaluation, so they were not outstanding, kind of were removed from the record of this
Exactly.
dashboard until the new update. Earlier, you were telling us about the additional measures, and if I understand correctly, there's also kind of a hierarchy or ranking of additional measure, right? From
Yes.
softer to harder. So the decision of color coding based on time rather than severity, can you walk us through the steps that you and your team discussed to decide, let's reflect this dimension instead of that other one?
You know what? I'm really thinking, because it's been years, but I think the main issue at the time and how the discussion initially was framed was, so again in 2020, the observation that many countries at the time, especially that was the end of phase 3, had been under additional measures for a very long time. I don't remember exactly the data, but some countries had been even like for almost 10 years or maybe even more. So I think the concern at the time was really about how long a country, I mean, you really had to put pressure. It was just not acceptable to have countries not taking the necessary measures for so long. So I think that was the main concern at the time. But it's true that now, if it was to be done again, probably we would think differently, because I think now we're at the end of phase 4, where we've really applied so many additional measures. I don't have the data in mind, but the numbers are really extremely high. And maybe we could have coded. It's a very good point. We could have color coded the countries based on the number of additional measures, because to me, actually, I think it's probably the most interesting indicator, the one that really gives a sense of how concerned the working group is, because it's extremely resource intensive, and the fact that a country that the working group has applied so many measures, meaning there's been a discussion on that country behind every measure, really means that the working group is impatient, is worried, and really needs to really expect this country to take action. So more than actually the number of dots, because that's one of the points I wanted to make also, the dots, the number of dots reflect the number of issues, but also to an extent how the recommendations are structured. I mean, because in some countries, the same issue would give rise to two separate recommendations. You would have two dots, but depending on how it is drafted, you would have one recommendation in another country. So you also have to keep that in mind. And what we hope is that over time, also colleagues or evaluation teams, as they structure the recommendations, have this in mind and try to be a bit more, harmonize practices to that extent, so that it becomes more meaningful too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This is the part that I really enjoy about being able to talk with a team that designed this type of tools. Because we get a little bit of insight of what makes it in, what doesn't make it in, and potentially helping us understand and help us see how we can interpret the results, especially as many of us here are either researchers or research adjacent in our activities. So thank you, Solène.
You're welcome. I don't know if there are any other questions, or should I stay maybe on the dashboard? I don't know if I'll just go back to the.
No, I think for now I don't see anybody else raising their hands.
Okay.
If anything, we can come back to.
But maybe I'll just to say, because maybe it's actually easier to understand what I wanted. So I just wanted to finish actually with a few considerations on what we thought, which is where the challenges, and actually we've mentioned quite a few. The fact that the messaging around those countries in blue on the dashboard was complex, because we really didn't want to give the impression that they were performing well. What the dashboard is saying is that at the moment there's no information. So that was one of the issues, and this is why we gave so much attention to the introduction to the dashboard on the website, and we hope that the message is clear. The other issue was on the structuring of the dots, which reflect as much the drafting style, let's say, of an evaluation team, as much as the number of issues, to an extent, of course, and the fact that the number of additional measures was probably a more interesting indicator. So I'm just looking at my note. Yeah, another constraint, and you may understand it through when looking at how the dashboard is structured. Another constraint was just technology, because the members actually wanted something where you could click every cell and you would go straight to the relevant section of the report, and they had this vision that was extremely ambitious. And this is Jisoo. So with Jisoo's best efforts, we could only, I think it's still nice, but this is why we decided we could not really click. We can only hover and send one hover box per row. So this is why we decided to build country summaries, which I think in a way is not bad. It's just maybe the access to the country summary is not obvious. But if you have any feedback on that, it would be great. But this is why also, this technology was also a big constraint, and we also had to explain to members, we had to do a demonstration to members. Even for us to share the new information, to ask them to review it, it's a nightmare, because you cannot really share Power BI with external users. Just not going into detail, but it's been complex on the technical level. And so this is why, in a way, because this was kind of new, because we were not sure how the dashboard would be received, and because it's still sensitive, obviously, for countries to see themselves in a list next to the others. Some countries were really worried that it gave too much weight or too much impression that countries could be compared, which is not exactly the case. So this is why really the working group wanted to make it clear that it was a pilot, and that we really would try to seek feedback to make sure that our message would be understood and that it would be useful for people. So again, if you have there's a website, there's the link on the webpage, and you should really feel free to give us any feedback you want. If you have time, that would be most helpful. And maybe just to finish, and sorry, I probably have taken too much time on the presentation, but just the benefits still, because it's still new, it's a pilot project. But I think in terms of the benefits, I think what is useful, I think, is the fact that we try to create a entry point for the information on the monitoring process and to make sense of the huge amount of reports and information about the process. So this is at least, from a very factual and data management point of view, something we try to do, and I hope it's useful. It's also, as I mentioned, also a way of encouraging maybe evaluation teams and people who draft reports to think a bit also how, in terms of how the number of recommendations will look like in the dashboard, how the additional measures will look like in the dashboard, and take this into account, because it will, at the end of the day, be published under quantitative data. So you also may be helping harmonizing practices. Another, and probably the best, the main benefit that I mentioned before is really to help the working group think about data. And very importantly, because we are about to work on phase 5 of the new round of evaluations, there's really a question about whether, if we want to be able to produce more systematic data, to be able to make the dashboard or any other visualization tool more, meaningful, clearer, etc., I think data and comparison has to be built in the system, in the new monitoring process, because our processes have never been designed for this. So it goes against nature, even in a way, of the working group. So if we really want to develop this kind of tools, we really need to also embed them from the beginning in our evaluation processes. And hopefully that will also be part of the discussion on a new round of evaluations, which will start very soon. So that's all I wanted to add on the positive side. No, of course, I should have mentioned, I hope it does give a sense of, the main issues of concern for the working group, the type of issues, the type of topics, and it gives us all a sense that most countries, a lot of countries are under additional measures. So even countries, I think you would not necessarily expect to be under, a significant number of additional measures.
Great. So we have a few minutes. Maybe we can open the floor. Could you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Great. So let's see if... All right. I do have a couple of questions, so maybe while the rest warm up a little bit. I wonder about the next steps. So one is right now the pilot is open for feedback, right, on the website. Could you tell us until when will your team be receiving feedback, and will the pilot or the dashboard be done while it is revised or updated or changed, or are we planning to just see it go from pilot to just being there? That would be my first question. And my second question is about sustainability of this project. Will this be updated every 6 months, once a year, or it will be kind of like an ongoing updating process?
So thanks a lot for this question. So in terms of the deadline for feedback, there's no clear deadline, because the decision of the working group was just to wait and see. I think the understanding is that the dashboard would be revisited, that we would take stock of feedback by the end of 2026. So potentially during the December meeting. So any feedback before October or November, but we're going to try to also publicize it a bit more, so to make sure that we receive more feedback. But this is the timeline we're talking about, but this is not necessarily set. Also trying to see how it goes. In terms of updates, it's after every plenary. I should have mentioned that. So after every plenary of the working group, so 3 at the moment. So the next updates are to be expected sometime April, by the end of April, and then July, and then potentially January next year. So we're also trying to include when the next update will be for some countries, when the information is known, so that it's as up to date as possible. It really gives the most recent information.
Well, that's very good to hear. So very much as soon as you guys know of any changes to a situation, we can expect the website to be updated soon after. That's really great.
Yeah, and as I was mentioning, because again, it's sensitive for countries, and because also some of the decisions to apply some measures are not always straightforward. You would think it's straightforward, it's not. So we also need to go through a round of confirmation, like verification by countries. So we just prepare the updates. We make sure the countries are all okay with them. They don't have any questions, any doubts, and then we publish. So, which is also technically takes a few more days also. Nothing has been straightforward.
Have there been conversations or considerations about providing the dashboard in other languages as well?
Yes, yes, we're expected to publish it in French. And the French delegation to the Working Group on Bribery is regularly, reminding us of this. Yeah, we should. It's a resource problem, but yeah, because our products are normally in English and French, usually adopted in English and then translated when resources become available. I think that's
Great.
In the coming months.
It looks very good. I'm happy that we have this new resource available to practitioners, researchers. So really, I wasn't aware that your team had also been working on something similar. I would love to see if there is some collaboration possibility there between the two sides. One of the things that as researchers we usually struggle with is the sustainability of data sets, specifically in terms of updating it, right? Especially with multiple countries, things, I mean, legislation can change very rapidly. It escapes the possibility of a university team, so it's great to see that an international organization with such a stellar record of monitoring implementation of an important convention is doing this kind of work. So I would like to congratulate you and Jisoo and the rest of the team.
Thank you.
Myself and on behalf of the community, of participants of the roundtable, I think that it's a meaningful product that you guys have added to our list. So thank you so much.
No, so thanks a lot. And really, in terms of sustainability, obviously, when phase 5 starts, this is also we're going to have to think about how the impact on the dashboard. So it's still hopefully it's still there for a few more years. But then who knows what it will become. But really, thanks so much for all the questions, which actually it's interesting because it confirms, some of the doubts or questions we had ourselves. And thanks for the also extremely interesting suggestion on color coding based on number of additional measures. That's really definitely something we'll be discussing internally. And really, if I may, I really encourage you to provide any feedback in writing or to get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to know really, and you can be frank. You can make any suggestion you want. If you think that there are ways of improving it, even really, on the very technical level, on accessibility, just information that we could give to make it clearer, just we would really appreciate it. We spend so much time on it. We are really trying to make it work as best as we can.
Absolutely. So for everyone attending here, and of course for those viewers who will be watching this roundtable later on YouTube, where it has kind of like a second run, I do encourage everyone to go to the website. It was shared earlier, right? The title is OECD Anti-Bribery Convention Country Monitoring Dashboard. Right there, right under the title, you have a field for submitting feedback. Right, that is clickable. So I do hope that researchers and practitioners, share their thoughts about this, because that's exactly the point, right? To make it impactful, and very often we just need to hear from the audience to say how they feel about this. Thank you again, Solène.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that I couldn't hear we couldn't hear from Jisoo, but I know that it took a team, of very hardworking practitioners to get this done. And I look very much forward to seeing the next iteration of this dashboard, not just in terms of updating the data, but how the design will continue evolving.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your attention.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.